Angel Bay Platt here with a special video today. I'm calling this Mini Bottle Mania because obviously I got a bunch of mini bottles. So what's going on? Well, a good friend of mine the other day was helping family members clean out their house and found just tons of liquor bottles and knew a guy to properly dispose of them. Brought them over to me, and digging through the box somewhere I found a ton of these little mini generically 50 milliliter bottles, and some of them were old. I hadn't seen some of these labels before, or it's been a long time, so I thought, what a great excuse to do a video. So today what I did was I picked out a dozen of them. I just thought either could have a good story or something I hadn't seen in a long time, what have you, and I thought I would share with you the stories behind them. If you watch the channel, know I'm such a dork for this stuff, so it's a little self-indulgent, but I think you guys might appreciate this. So let's go ahead and get her started off. I will be going to the notes quite often. All right, the very first one we have here is Old Forester. This is basically their baseline, the 86 proof. A couple things here that caught my eye and the reason why I kept this. Basically, it looks like it has two front labels, even though they are different. I found that unique. One thing, too, on the very bottom, it notes, today these would be sold as 50 milliliter bottles, but this is, all these bottles are 40, 50 years old, so pre-metric system here in the U.S. pretty much. This is denoted as a 1/10 pint. So here we're going with a pint, kind of like before the days of 750 milliliters, they were known as fifths. So this is a 1/10 pint. Also, too, on the label it reads, Old Forester, America's Guest Whiskey since 1870. That's when the brand was founded. Did a little research, and apparently they used the slogan, America's Guest Whiskey, back in the 40s and 50s to kind of imply that, hey, you're having a cocktail party, having the neighbors over, you want to break out the good stuff, the Old Forester. So very, very cool there. Next one is a brand that I had not heard of. I think I might have seen a bottle before, but just didn't know what it was. And it's called Imperial. It comes to us from Hiram Walker. It is a blended whiskey. It is basically their take or their product to counter Seagram 7. This at one time was a well-known brand in the 60s and 70s. People's palates were changing then. If they were going to drink whiskey, they wanted a little softer, something a little smoother. Thus, the blended whiskeys started becoming more popular. This product is 30% whiskey, 70% grain neutral spirit. If you remember, Seagram's is 25-75. Apparently, looking at some of the tasting notes, though, this did not compare favorably to Seagram's 7, so kind of give you an idea there. Also, too, apparently this brand is still around. I'm not sure who's producing it today, but this might be something you might randomly find today. Next is a bottle that just definitely stuck out to me, and that is El Toro Tequila. Has the little hat up top. And I, right there, just thought, all right, well, that's perfect, a little marketing gimmick there. There's a little more to it. Apparently, this hat, they also sell larger size bottles. Again, the brand's around today. And so the plastic hat's a little bigger. You would put salt in there and then use it to rim your tequila glasses for your shot. So I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't know there was more to the gag. So whoever marketing thought that up, I hope they got a raise out of that. Next bottle we have here is Smirnoff Blue Label. Now, they do produce this product today. I just don't see it that often, and I have not seen a bottle like this in a long time. This is their 100 proof product. Apparently, they have a numbering system along with the different colored labels. This is number 57. The traditional red label, that's 80 proof, is number 21. So, found that quite interesting, but I hadn't seen one of these bottles like this in a long time, so I just had to set that aside. Next here we have Hennessy VSOP. This is a classic old label of theirs. Doing a little research, I noted it didn't have much on the label, but if you looked at it compared to the Smirnoff bottle, it's a decent bit smaller. And that is because this is not a 50 milliliter bottle. This is a 3 CL or centiliter bottle, or 30 milliliters. Excuse me. Apparently, this is done. VSOP is generally more. Excuse me again. Apparently more than regular VS. And if you think about it, back 50 years ago, I doubt any of these things cost more than 50 cents a bottle. And to probably keep it within line of these other products or avoid getting over $1, which again 50 years ago would have been pretty stiff, they probably bottled it in the smaller bottle just to price-wise kind of stay in the same range. Next one is Shinley Reserve. This has an interesting story. Apparently inside is 8-year-old Canadian blended whiskey. The 8-year-old statement's on the bottom. This product comes to us from a company called Shinley Industries that was headquartered in the Empire State Building, apparently after King Kong had climbed it. Shinley at one time owned Cruise on Rum, Blatt's Beer, I.W. Harper, which is another brand we'll talk about in a little bit. And they had others before, a lot of these brands had come through different companies, and this was one of the corporate structures that they came through. Now, something unique about this, we talked about before with like Navy rums and things like that, that at certain points in time in history, naval officers or Navy vessels were granted rations of alcohol, usually rum, but alcohol in general for the men that are out to sea for months. The boys get thirsty. This was supposedly what was rationed to submarine officers in the Pacific based out of Midway during World War II, and eventually gave the nickname Shinley's Black Death. But I find that whole thing interesting, and I wondered who made that executive decision. Well, the boys out to sea need something good to drink. We'll give them Shinley's. Next, we have Beam's Choice. This is a green label. This particular product was bottled at 90 proof. It's no longer around. At the time it was developed, it was to be a product that sat between the regular white label, which was a 4-year-old product, and then there was a Beam Black, a black label bottle that was an 8-year product. This was originally a 6-year product that kind of sat in between. Eventually they eliminated the age statement, and eventually the brand just faded away. But this is just another one of their lines, a 6-year, 90 proof spirit. Next up is Old Crow. This says it's a 5-year-old Kentucky straight bourbon. Now, Old Crow has been around since the 1830s. It was one of the original brands out there. Today it's part of Beam Suntory, but this time when this was produced, it was when they were with National Distilleries. In the late 60s and 70s, however, there became a glut of whiskey. Whiskey sales had dropped, but because you're producing an aged spirit, you have to kind of project out years in advance. And so they ended up with a glut of whiskey. And what happened at this time, they were putting older spirits into some of their more base brands. So there's a decent chance that in this was some 7, maybe 8-year-old whiskeys in here, just because they had so much, and at that time no one was doing 10 and 12 and 15-year-old bourbons. The super premium thing had not happened yet, so probably fortunate for the Old Crow drinkers at the time. They probably got some some really good stuff in there at a reasonable price. Next is I.W. Harper. We had talked about that, alluded to it a little bit earlier. This is an 86 proof product. The I.W. in I.W. Harper is for Isaac Wolf Bernheim. They decided not to go with the Bernheim. They went with Harper. They thought it was just a more digestible name in the marketplace. I'm not sure, I know it's 50 years ago, but I'm not sure where Bernheim necessarily would chase people off. They decided to go with Harper. This product was actually one of the top selling bourbons in Japan for years. This is what they kind of thought American bourbon was. This brand at one time was owned by Shinley. They purchased it in 1938, held on to it for a few years. If the name Bernheim sounds familiar to you, You might know Bernheim Distillery. That is where Heaven Hill is their main distillery. They purchased that after their distillery had that famous distillery fire they had. They utilized Bernheim to pick up production again. There's also a line of Bernheim whiskeys. Probably the most known is the Bernheim Wheat Whiskey, which is actually a pretty good product. Next, we have Jack Daniel's Green Label. This is at 90 proof. Jack Daniel's, throughout its history at various points in time, has had a Green Label product. It kind of comes, it kind of goes. This particular one they quit producing in 1987. Today they have another Green Label they're doing, but it's an 80 proof product. What's the difference between Green Label and Black Label? Green Label, or Black Label, when they do the blend, they pick barrels from all different parts of the barrel house, because barrels will age at a different pace in different parts of the barrel house. So they'll pick them from all top, bottom, sides, middle, what have you, to do that blend to keep that consistency. Green Label, they just take from the middle and blend it and kind of forget it. They just kind of use the middle and are not hitting all points in the barrel house. Next we have Early Times. Early Times is one of the older brands, not really a huge name here in the U.S., actually more popular overseas. Its production started all the way back in 1860 at a place called Early Times Station, Kentucky. Oddly enough, they sell this as bourbon overseas, but here in the U.S. it's Kentucky whiskey. Some of the whiskeys in there are aged in used bourbon barrels, thus they can't call it bourbon here. But and this must have, and I believe this was an overseas purchase, maybe at an Army, base overseas. But on this bottle it says Kentucky Straight Bourbon. But what you buy here in the States is just Kentucky whiskey. Lastly is a special bottle, kind of with a Vegas twist to it. This is regular Jim Beam, but the bottle says Bingo Palace. Now, what's Bingo Palace? Bingo Palace was the original locals casino out here in Las Vegas, opened in 1976. Before then, if you lived out here and wanted to gamble, you went to the Strip or you went downtown, but there's really no locals place for the people that worked in the casinos, what have you. Well, that changed in 76 when they opened Bingo Palace. Today, it's known as Palace Station, part of the Station Casinos out here, owned by the Fertitta brothers. They're the guys that gave us the UFC. So, but there's about 8, 9 of these casinos throughout town, and it's where the locals go. And they did, I guess, Jim Beam did a special deal, or this is probably something they sold in their gift shop. Little personal note, the first casino I ever stayed at, or ever was the Palace Station, or the old Bingo Palace. I remember checking into the hotel when we came from the airport, went to the casino floor, and I could have stayed there the whole trip. But my buddies and everybody were like, well, there's a whole town of this. I was like, what? We go this trip, and everything. But that was the first casino I stayed at, so that kind of touches me in the soft place. Well, guys, I hope you like this. If you know me, I love dorking out on this stuff. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, maybe some bottles that you might remind me of, please let me know. And if I come through it, they did give me some more stuff. And if I run into any more bottles or fun stuff like this, I might have to do this again because, again, I'm just an absolute dork. Well, until next time, bottoms up.